Hey everyone! Just a quick reminder to subscribe and hit that like button if you're enjoying my stories. It really helps me know you're into the content. Thanks for tuning in, and let's dive right in. It was always the same melody. Cheerful, nostalgic, and oddly comforting. The sound of the ice cream truck's jingle would drift through the neighborhood like clockwork every Saturday afternoon, signaling the end of another long week. For Maya, it was a highlight, the pinnacle of her small, happy world. For me, it was a reminder that I'd survived another week of balancing spreadsheets, dodging office politics, and coming home to a quiet condo that sometimes felt just a little too big for two people. "Mommy, can we get the swirl one this time, with the sprinkles?" Maya asked, her small hand tugging at the hem of my sweater as I tried to fold laundry. Her voice was bright and hopeful, a spark of joy in the monotony of adulthood. "Of course, baby," I replied, ruffling her soft curls. "But only if you promise to eat the whole thing this time. No leaving the cone for me to finish, okay?" She giggled, a sound that made the stress of the week feel distant and unimportant. Saturdays were ours. We'd spend the morning at the park, Maya on the swings, her laughter echoing as I pushed her higher and higher. Then, when the afternoon sun got too hot, we'd cool off with ice cream from the Chill Bliss Creamery truck that always parked by the entrance. Chill Bliss was a staple in the city. Their trucks were everywhere, their pastel colors and smiling penguin logo instantly recognizable. The jingles were catchy too, just a few bars, but they stuck in your head long after the truck was gone. Everyone loved them. Kids would swarm the trucks like bees to honey, clutching crumpled dollar bills and chattering excitedly about which flavor to get. Even adults weren't immune to their charm. "Best ice cream in town," people said, and I couldn't disagree. Their chocolate fudge swirl was my personal weakness. That Saturday had been no different. The park was buzzing with life. Kids playing tag, couples walking their dogs, families picnicking on the grass. Maya was in her element, running from the swings to the slide to the monkey bars with boundless energy. When the ice cream truck pulled up, its jingle cutting through the chatter, Maya's eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. We'd gotten our usual treats, strawberry for her, chocolate for me, and walked home hand in hand, sticky fingers and all. By the time we got back to the condo, the evening news was already on. I wasn't much of a TV person, but I liked the background noise. It made the place feel less empty. I flicked it on as Maya settled on the floor with her coloring books, the remnants of her ice cream still smudged on her cheeks. The anchor was mid-report, her tone unusually grave. "Authorities are investigating reports of aggressive behavior among children at multiple local kindergartens," she said. "Witnesses describe the children as violent, uncontrollable, and in some cases behaving in animal-like ways." I paused, halfway through folding a t-shirt. "Animal-like ways?" I muttered under my breath. That was odd. The screen cut to shaky phone footage of a classroom in chaos, kids screaming, clawing at each other, knocking over chairs. A teacher tried to intervene, only to recoil as one of the kids lunged at her, teeth bared. The clip ended abruptly, and the anchor returned, her expression carefully neutral. "Officials have yet to determine the cause of the behavior, but parents are advised to monitor their children closely and report any unusual symptoms." "Mommy, what's that?" Maya asked, looking up from her crayons. "Nothing, sweetheart," I said quickly, changing the channel to a cartoon. "Just grown-up stuff." Still, the footage stuck with me. It was probably nothing, I told myself. Kids could be wild sometimes, and the news had a way of blowing things out of proportion. But later that night, as I lay in bed listening to the distant hum of traffic, I couldn't shake the image of that classroom, those kids snarling and biting like animals. The next morning, I brought it up to my neighbor, Mrs. Sanders, as we crossed paths in the hallway. She was an older woman, always ready with a kind word or a casserole. If anyone had their ear to the ground in this building, it was her. "Oh, that nonsense," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "The news loves a good scare. Probably just some prank or a case of bad parenting. Nothing to worry about." I nodded, trying to match her nonchalance, but deep down, something didn't feel right. Still, life went on. Monday came, and with it, the grind of work. By the end of the week, the strange news reports had faded to the back of my mind. I was too busy to dwell on it, until Friday night, when everything began to change. The strange reports from earlier in the week hadn't gone away, In fact, they seemed to be getting worse. The news now played on a loop, showing eerily similar footage from different parts of the city. Children screaming, crawling on all fours, and even attacking others. The footage was shaky, often taken by horrified parents or teachers, and I found myself glued to it despite how much it unsettled me. Experts were baffled. Some speculated it was a virus, others blamed environmental factors or even food poisoning. One reporter mentioned, almost in passing, that a number of affected children had recently eaten ice cream from Chill Bliss trucks. That caught my attention. It felt like such a strange coincidence, too specific to ignore. But then again, who didn't eat Chill Bliss ice cream? They were everywhere. The idea that their ice cream could be the cause seemed absurd. Still, I couldn't shake the thought, and when Saturday rolled around, it was harder than usual to keep Maya away from the news. "Are we going to the park, Mommy?" she asked, bouncing on her toes with excitement. Her energy was contagious, but my unease from the news lingered like a shadow. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. Just like always. The park was as lively as ever when we arrived, but something felt off. Maybe it was just my imagination, but the parents seemed more watchful, their laughter a little too forced. Maya, oblivious to my nerves, ran straight for the swings, her giggles cutting through the tension. I sat on a bench nearby, scanning the playground while pretending to check my phone. And that's when I saw it. A boy, no older than 7, crouched in the dirt near the sandbox. His back was to me, and his movements were jerky and unnatural, like a glitching robot. A little girl approached him hesitantly, clutching a toy shovel. She said something I couldn't hear, and the boy whipped around so fast it made my stomach flip. His face was smeared with dirt, his lips pulled back in a snarl that showed teeth too sharp for a child. He lunged at the girl, clawing at her arm and letting out a guttural growl. "Hey!" I shouted, jumping to my feet. The girl's parents rushed over, pulling her away just as the boy fell forward onto all fours, growling and snapping like a feral dog. Maya turned from the swings, her eyes wide with curiosity and fear. "Let's go, sweetheart," I said quickly, grabbing her hand. "Now." "But Mommy." "Now," I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. Maya didn't argue. She clung to me as we hurried out of the park, leaving behind the startled murmurs of the other parents. By the time we got home, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I locked the door behind us, double-checking it out of instinct. Maya sat on the couch, her brow furrowed. "Was that boy sick?" she asked quietly. "I don't know, baby," I admitted, crouching in front of her. "But I think it's best we stay home for now, okay? Just to be safe." She nodded, her small hand reaching for mine. I gave it a reassuring squeeze and kissed her forehead, wishing I could promise her everything was fine. Later that evening, as Maya colored at the coffee table, I turned on the news. The headlines were worse. Authorities were officially treating the outbreak as a public health emergency, and they still didn't know the cause. A doctor being interviewed on screen looked exhausted, his voice trembling as he described the symptoms. Aggression, animalistic behavior, and in some cases biting. "What's happening to these kids is unprecedented," he said. "It's like the virus, or whatever this is, targets their most primal instincts. We're urging parents to keep their children indoors and report any unusual behavior immediately." I reached for my phone to text a friend, but before I could unlock it, the screen froze. A loud chime blared from the TV, making Maya jump. The picture disappeared, replaced by bold red letters against a black screen. "Emergency alert. Do not stop for the ice cream at the ice cream truck." My breath caught in my throat. The alert repeated, the words burned into my mind. I grabbed the remote, trying to change the channel, but it was useless. The TV wouldn't respond. Frustrated, I reached for my phone, only to find the same message plastered across the screen. I couldn't unlock it, couldn't call anyone. Nothing. "What's that, Mommy?" Maya asked, her voice small. "Just something on the news," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "It's nothing to worry about." But it wasn't nothing. Not even close. My hands shook as I set the phone down. Somewhere in the distance, faint and almost melodic, I thought I heard the jingle of an ice cream truck. And for the first time in years, it didn't sound cheerful. It sounded like a warning. The alert was still frozen on the TV screen when the power cut out. The condo plunged into complete darkness, and for a moment, the silence was so absolute that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Mommy?" Maya's voice was a frightened whisper. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said, though my voice trembled. "Just a power outage." But it didn't feel okay. I fumbled for my phone on the coffee table, but it wouldn't turn on. The emergency alert still had it locked. I tried to force it to restart, but nothing happened. Then, faint at first, I heard it. The music. The same cheerful jingle that had always made Maya's face light up on Saturday afternoons. The same song I'd hummed absent-mindedly while walking back from the park. But now, it felt wrong. It was slow, distorted somehow, like a recording played on a broken machine. I froze. The sound was coming closer. "Mommy, what's that?" Maya asked, clutching the hem of my shirt. I whispered, pulling her close. I didn't know what else to do. I crept to the living room window, careful not to make a sound. My heart was racing as I peeked out through a sliver between the curtains. There it was. The ice cream truck. Its pastel colors and smiling penguin logo looked almost eerie in the dim light of the street lamp. The truck moved slowly down the road, its jingle echoing off the buildings. There was no one driving, or at least I couldn't see anyone behind the wheel. I stayed frozen in place, watching as the truck came to a stop in front of the house across the street. My neighbor, Mr. Callahan, stepped out onto his porch. He was an older man, always friendly, always willing to help if you needed a light bulb changed or a heavy box carried. He looked confused, scratching his head as he stared at the truck. "Hey!" he called out, his voice cutting through the eerie melody. "What the hell's going on?" The truck didn't respond. It just sat there, its music playing on a loop. I wanted to scream at him to go back inside, but my throat felt like it had closed up. Then it happened. A loud, deafening bang rang out, cutting through the night. For a split second, I couldn't process what I'd heard. It wasn't until I saw Mr. Callahan collapse in the street, his body crumpling like a rag doll, that I realized. A gunshot. "Oh my God," I whispered, my hand flying to my mouth. "Mommy, what's happening?" Maya's voice was trembling now, and I turned to her, trying to shield her from the window. "Go to your room, Maya," I said, my voice shaking. "Right now, and stay there, okay? Don't come out until I say so." "But Mommy, now!" I snapped, harsher than I meant to. Tears welled in her eyes, but she obeyed, running to her room and shutting the door behind her. I turned back to the window, my hands gripping the edge of the curtain. The truck hadn't moved. Mr. Callahan's body lay in the middle of the street, motionless. Then, slowly, the truck started to roll forward again, its jingle never stopping. I moved to another window, the one facing the back of the building. My stomach dropped. There were more of them. 3, maybe 4 trucks, all crawling through the neighborhood like predators on the hunt. Their music overlapped, creating a haunting cacophony that made my skin crawl. I realized then that this wasn't just my street. It wasn't just one truck. This was everywhere. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. I had to do something. Call for help. Warn someone. But my phone was useless, and the power was still out. And then I remembered Maya. I ran to her room, throwing the door open. She was sitting on her bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit to her chest. Her wide, tear-filled eyes looked up at me, and I knew I had to be strong for her. "Mommy," she whispered. "It's going to be okay," I lied, sitting beside her and pulling her into my arms. "We're going to stay right here, okay? We're safe as long as we stay inside." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. From somewhere outside, the jingle played on. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the music, faint but insistent, drifting through the still air. Even when it finally stopped, my mind wouldn't quiet. The image of Mr. Callahan lying in the street was burned into my memory, as vivid as the horrifying realization that the trucks weren't going away. Maya eventually fell asleep, curled up against me, her small body clutching her stuffed rabbit. I stayed awake, staring at the darkened ceiling, running through every terrible possibility. By morning, the faint light streaming through the curtains gave me just enough clarity to start piecing everything together. Something about the ice cream trucks. Something about that god-awful jingle. The emergency alert. The kids acting like animals. The news reports. I carefully slid out from under Maya, tucking her rabbit closer to her. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. I grabbed my phone from the bedside table, hoping against hope it would work this time. It still wouldn't unlock, stuck on that same emergency alert. But I had an idea. The phone had a basic browser feature that I could access from the lock screen, a weird quirk I'd noticed once but never had a reason to use. Now I prayed it would be enough. I tapped the browser icon, and to my relief, it opened. The search bar blinked at me, waiting. I typed in "Chill Bliss Ice Cream Trucks Emergency Alert" and hit enter. What I found made my stomach drop. A forum thread had exploded overnight, filled with frantic posts and half-baked theories. Parents shared videos of their kids snarling, biting, and clawing. Others described run-ins with the trucks, some eerily similar to what I'd seen happen to Mr. Callahan. But one post stood out. It wasn't frantic or panicked. It was cold, clinical, like something out of a medical journal. The mutated bacteria theory is the most plausible. A recent leak at the Chill Bliss Creamery plant introduced a strain of bacillus bacteria into their production line. In its mutated form, it's neurotoxic, triggering hyperaggression in children. Early symptoms mimic rabies, irritability, biting, animalistic behavior. Adults seem less susceptible at first, but exposure to higher doses, likely factory workers, results in similar aggression. Bacteria spreads through saliva, bites, or close proximity to an infected person. I stared at the screen, rereading the post over and over. A mutated bacteria. Chill Bliss. The factory workers. It all made sense now. The kids were the first wave, but adults could be infected too. And the factory workers, the trucks. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. If the factory workers were infected, they were driving the trucks. They weren't just random vehicles, they were weapons. I felt sick. My hands shook as I scrolled through more posts, some with blurry photos of trucks parked outside homes. Others had clips of drivers leaning out of windows, faces wild and unrecognizable, yelling incoherently before opening fire. I didn't need to see more. I put the phone down and took a deep breath, trying to calm the rising panic. I needed a plan. Maya and I couldn't stay here forever, but leaving now was suicide. Those trucks were still out there, and we didn't know how far this had spread. For now, we had to stay put. I went into survival mode, moving as quietly as possible so I wouldn't wake Maya. I started by barricading the front door, shoving the heavy bookshelf in front of it, and wedging a chair under the doorknob for good measure. I closed every curtain in the condo, making sure there wasn't even a sliver of space to see inside. The kitchen was next. I gathered every non-perishable food item I could find, canned soup, crackers, peanut butter, and piled them on the counter. I filled every container I had with tap water, just in case the supply went out. I found an old flashlight in the junk drawer, along with a couple of spare batteries. I kept it within arm's reach, even though I hated how the beams seemed to cut through the dark like a signal. By the time I finished, the sun was high in the sky, and the air in the condo felt heavy, oppressive. I sat on the floor next to Maya, who had woken up and was quietly coloring in her book. "Are we still staying home, Mommy?" she asked. "For now," I said gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We just need to wait until it's safe." She nodded, her expression solemn in a way that broke my heart. No 5-year-old should have to think about safe. I spent the rest of the day keeping her distracted. We played board games by flashlight, read her favorite books, and I let her eat more snacks than I normally would have. Anything to keep her from asking about the trucks or the strange noises outside. But no amount of distractions could keep the tension from creeping in. Every time I heard a faint sound, the wind rustling the trees, a car passing in the distance, my heart jumped into my throat. And every so often, faint but unmistakable, I heard the jingle again. It wasn't just one truck this time. It was overlapping, echoing from different directions, like a sinister symphony. I stayed up again that night, sitting by the window with the flashlight in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. The trucks didn't come down our street this time, but I knew they were close. This wasn't over. It was on the third night that I realized we couldn't stay. The trucks had been circling for days, their jingle a constant reminder that we were trapped. Supplies were running dangerously low. I'd rationed what little we had, but Maya was still hungry, her stomach growling louder than I cared to admit. She was pale, her energy fading, and her questions, "When can we go outside, Mommy?" were growing harder to answer. I was sitting by the window, keeping watch, when I found the radio. It was buried in a box of old junk I'd meant to donate months ago. A small, battery-powered relic that looked like it belonged in another century. I almost didn't turn it on, but something in me needed to hear another human voice, even if it was just static. The crackle of sound startled me. and I turned the volume down quickly, afraid it might draw attention. At first it was all static. Then, through the hiss, I heard it. Safe zone. Set up. West of the city limits. Coordinates available. I leaned in, straining to hear. The voice was calm but urgent, and I caught fragments. Military presence? Checkpoints? Bring no infected. A safe zone. I clutched the radio to my chest, tears welling up. It was a sliver of hope, the first we'd had in days. But it was also a risk. The trucks were still out there, patrolling the streets like wolves hunting prey. Still, staying wasn't an option anymore. "Maya," I whispered, shaking her gently. She stirred, blinking up at me with tired eyes. "What is it, Mommy?" "We're leaving," I said, trying to sound confident. "We're going to a safe place. But we have to be very quiet, okay?" She nodded, her little hand gripping mine tightly as we packed what little we had left. Water bottles, a few granola bars, the flashlight, and the stuffed rabbit she refused to part with. I wrapped her in a blanket to keep her warm and carried her on my hip. We slipped out the back door into the cool night air. The street was eerily quiet, but I knew better than to trust it. The trucks could come back at any moment. "Stay close to me," I whispered, even though she was already clinging to me like her life depended on it. We moved quickly, darting between shadows, my heart pounding with every step. The world felt impossibly large and empty, the distant hum of the trucks a constant reminder that safety was still far away. We were halfway down the street when I heard it, the jingle. It started faint, barely audible, but it grew louder, closer, until it was unmistakable. My stomach dropped. One of the trucks was turning onto our street. "Run," I hissed, grabbing Maya's hand and pulling her along. She stumbled, struggling to keep up, and I scooped her up, ignoring the burning in my arms as I sprinted toward an alley. The truck's headlights swept the street, and I ducked behind a dumpster, clutching Maya to my chest. I could hear the engine rumbling, the jingle looping endlessly. And then it stopped. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the noise. I peeked out from behind the dumpster, my breath catching in my throat. The truck had stopped just a few feet away, its door swinging open. A figure climbed out. A man, or at least what used to be one. His face was gaunt, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He stumbled toward the sidewalk, a crowbar clutched in one hand, his movements jerky and unnatural. I tried to back away, but my foot scraped against the pavement, the sound impossibly loud in the stillness. The man's head snapped toward us. He saw us. "Go!" I screamed, shoving Maya ahead of me as I grabbed a piece of broken wood from the ground. The man lunged, and I swung the wood with every ounce of strength I had, catching him across the face. "Run, Maya!" I yelled, but she was frozen, her eyes wide with terror. Before I could grab her, the man turned on her. His movements were inhumanly fast, and in one horrifying moment, he grabbed her arm and bit down. Maya's scream tore through the night, piercing and raw. "No!" I screamed, slamming the wood into his head again and again until he crumpled to the ground. Maya was sobbing, clutching her arm where blood seeped through her jacket. I scooped her up, tears streaming down my face. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, my voice shaking. "It's going to be okay." But I knew it wasn't. I ran, cradling her against me, my mind racing. The safe zone was our only hope now. If there was any chance of saving her, it was there. Her sobs grew quieter as we ran, her little body growing limp in my arms. "Stay with me, Maya," I begged, my voice cracking. "We're almost there." But deep down, I knew. The infection was already spreading. Maya's weight grew heavier in my arms as I ran, her small body limp against me. Her breathing was shallow, punctuated by occasional whimpers. I dared not look at her arm again. The bite mark was seared into my memory, crimson and raw. The outskirts of the safe zone came into view as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. A makeshift barricade of barbed wire and steel fencing stretched across the road, manned by soldiers in hazmat suits. Behind them, rows of tents and vehicles formed a small camp. It looked like salvation. But Maya was stirring. At first I thought she was waking up, that she might still be okay. But then I felt her muscles tense, her fingers clawing at my jacket. "Mommy," she murmured, her voice distorted, guttural. "Maya?" I slowed, my heart hammering in my chest. She lifted her head, and my stomach turned. Her eyes were glassy, her pupils dilated, and her lips pulled back in a snarl that didn't belong on her sweet face. Her teeth snapped at the air, her small hands clawing at me with terrifying strength. No, 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 I whispered, clutching her tighter, tears spilling down my cheeks. Maya, baby, stay with me. Fight it. Please. Her growls deepened and I stumbled forward, barely able to hold on to her as she thrashed. The soldiers at the gate noticed us then, raising their weapons. Stop right there, one of them shouted. I froze, holding up one hand in surrender while still gripping Maya with the other. Please, she's just a little girl, I screamed. She's infected, but there has to be something you can do. The soldier's voice was muffled behind his mask. Ma'am, put the child down and back away slowly. No infected are allowed past this point. She's my daughter, I cried, desperation cracking my voice. She's only 5. You can't expect me to. There's no cure, the soldier interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. We can't let her in. If you don't comply, we'll have no choice but to take action. I looked down at Maya, her beautiful face contorted into something unrecognizable. Her small hands clawed at my arms, her teeth snapping inches from my skin. Maya, I whispered, my voice trembling. It's Mommy. I love you, baby. You're going to be okay. She let out a low growl, her head jerking toward me, and I knew. I sank to my knees, holding her close one last time. Her small body writhed in my arms, but I didn't let go. I pressed my lips to her forehead, my tears soaking her hair. I'm so sorry, I choked out. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. With trembling hands, I set her down on the ground. She lunged at me, snarling, and I backed away, my heart shattering with every step. Take care of her, I whispered to the soldiers. They nodded, their weapons raised as they moved toward her. I turned away, unable to watch, tapped, and stumbled toward the gate. The moment I passed through, the heavy steel doors slammed shut behind me, the clang echoing in my ears like a death knell. I collapsed to the ground, my body shaking with sobs. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the faint, haunting jingle of an ice cream truck, growing fainter as it drove away. Maya's laughter echoed in my memory, mixing with the sound of her cries, her snarls. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to drown it all out, but it was no use. She was gone. The safe zone was supposed to be a haven, but all I felt was the gaping hole in my chest, where my daughter used to be. I had survived, but at what cost?